We are sworn to push back the foul forces of chaos, those wretched creatures who defy the will of the Emperor. We are but human, but we will give them naught. No skulls shall we give to Khorne. No contagion shall we harbor for Nurgle. No pleasure shall we feel for Slanesh. And no change shall we ever endure. There will always be 10,000. And if we fail, no one is coming to save us. The Emperor protects. The Emperor protects.
Hey guys, non-voice changer third and only here. Today we're going to be doing a conversion. The first conversion on the channel. It's going to be of a group who are currently only known as the 10,000, pending actual name, which will be this group of inquisitorial demon hunters basically, that are actually only people, the best of the best from the Astra Militarum range, who are fortified against chaos by basically super intense religious doctrine. They spend all of their time worshipping and praying, and their models are going to be covered with relics and other gothic details. They're vaguely inspired, at least in the way that they're called the 10,000, by the Persian immortals, who, contrary to their name, died all the time. But their numbers were always bolstered back up to a certain number, which I think might have actually been 10,000, giving the impression that none of them ever died. A similar practice is used with these guys, because you, most importantly, can't be changing too much, otherwise Tzeentch would get happy, and we don't want Tzeentch happy. I started off by making most of this model normal, well, at least the legs and body. Some of the more heavy conversion influences will come in later, but the most important part about converting is changing the silhouette, and frankly there's not a lot of ways that we can do that on this first leg and body piece. After putting the legs and body together, we were onto proper conversion territory, which started off with this big sword. Now, there's a Grey Knight's hand attached, and so I'm going to take this hand that's currently holding a sword, the sword will be removed, and attach it to this larger sword, which is from the Grey Knight's paladin kit. This will make it look like, in fact, it is that bloke holding the sword, and he doesn't just have a massive glove for holding this sword for whatever reason. After assembling this with some pinning, I realised it didn't look very good, so I swapped to a different arm which held the sword better. I then gave this guy a big back banner type thing. Well, it's not actually that big. I think it might be a loincloth from the tactical squad. I'm not entirely sure what it's meant to be, but it is from that kit, and I took these two pieces of wire to make a more sort of holder for it so that it can be displayed above his back. I'd like to imagine it's some weird charter that declares that he's really holy or something. Probably wards off demons. But now we're on to something which actually does do a bit of warding off demons, or at least in my headcanon. I'm going to start off by taking the head and one of these jawless skulls, and then through cuts and files and frequent comparisons, because it's very easy to go a little bit too far with this, try and shave back the face and the back of the skull so that the actual skull can fit like a mask over the face. The idea of this being that demons have this whole way of perceiving you in the warp, this sort of footprint of your emotions and all that. So I was thinking perhaps if you cover yourself in enough bones, it begins to confuse the demons to a certain extent because, oh look, there's signatures of all of these different people. And maybe that would make them slightly harder to convert, or at least that's the hope. Also, it just looks really cool, and it's nice to imagine that the actual skulls of the previous number that you carry would be passed down to the next person in the 10,000. But it was time to do some basing. There will be more conversion coming up, don't worry, but this particular guy, because the base of the sword wasn't quite at the exact same height as the feet, needed something proper to prop it up. So I started off with this milliput, creating this base, which was going to be, well, pretty much sort of horrendous demon world in the making. So this retaining wall will be holding back this soil from a pool of blood. So, you know, it's going to be proper demon world, berserk, eclipse looking stuff. However, the head still slightly overhung the wall, so I created a small pile of rubble and then eventually stuck a rock on to properly support the severed head. After that, we were on to the next guy. This one's going to be the standard bearer instead of the sergeant. And so the most important thing is, of course, the standard. I started with this thing, which tops the actual standard if you build it as a command squad. Well, the Tempestus Scions, that is. but I removed this horse or possibly lion head. I then shaved it away and realised that a skull would fit absolutely perfectly in this slot. And that's exactly the sort of morbid, sort of Warhammer 40k Emperor religion type stuff we needed. Winged skull. That seems along the right alleyway. But that series of Astra Militarum logos on the side wasn't quite right, so I took this Inquisition symbol from another part of the Grey Knight Paladin's kit and took the little symbol off and placed that instead. I then took the bottom of this banner pole and shaved it down so that it would correctly fit against the slightly slanted base of this standard. And then after gluing them together, the bottom was slightly cut down so that it would better fit on the back, as well as a slight bit of smoothing of this raised back portion of the armour so that it could stand just above the head of the soldier. Of course, he needed some weaponry that could actually deal with some big nasty demons, so he was given a melter, and that melter was cleaned up also. The melter was actually left separate after checking so that it would be easier to paint later. Next I was on to the guy who was going to hold a flamer. After taking out the flamer and building the body as normal, I, of course, drilled out the gun barrel. I very briefly tried to do some proper sculpting to make a little flame jet, but that turned out not to have worked. So instead, I decided to change the orientation of this light. Since it was a bit weird that all of the torches faced actually exactly forwards, I thought, you know, facing in the direction that he's actually going would make more sense. And this conversion was done to all of them. Now we're on to the proper stuff. This is a little reliquary from the Grey Knights Strike Squad, or possibly Grey Knight Paladins. To be honest, I don't know, but it's the one that shows up all the time on eBay. I took this little styrene box type rod and cut out a small section to elevate the reliquary once the things to make it hang from a belt were gone. And then I took two more sections to be these sort of side little pointy bits on either side of the relic. I'm not entirely sure what the terminology for any of this is, but general gothic weird design feature. It ended up looking really cool, and of course the back was shaved down, as was with the standard bearer, so that it can sit nicely above the head and completely change the silhouette. Now, a lot of other smaller conversions were done to the rest of the squad, none that you didn't see up until this point. And so usually this is where the painting section would come in. But this has taken absolutely ages. Admittedly, not all of the time has been spent on this. I also have a life, and that takes up a lot of my time. So unfortunately I wasn't actually able to record most of this, but I do plan on adding to this army, so if you'd like to see any more of that in the future, then please do let me know in the comments, and next time I do something for this army, I'll make sure to actually record the painting segment this time. But for now, on to the reveals. This has honestly come out as one of the Warhammer squads that I am the proudest of. It's my first proper squad conversion. Most of the time it's just been like an extra piece stuck on, or once I did a proper big kit bash thing at a Games Workshop, but that was many years ago at this point. Now, with the amount of experience I have in the hobby, I feel that I could properly do a converted army, and it is such a rewarding experience, and I highly recommend it. I think these guys have come out awesome. I also did my first proper experimenting with OSL, which I think turned out a lot better than I'd expected. I did also forget to mention I did add purity seals all over these guys, though as you can see I'm clearly not quite good enough at taking the photographs yet. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope to see you again sometime. Bye for now.